it.
Got it. Yeah, I want to run through a couple of things like I've done in the past, but I want to give a lot of time for Q&A. And of course, as always, I'm a resource for folks. If we don't get time to your questions, this is what I do at Clearance Jobs. And so I thought that I would start, if you're not familiar with us, I wanted to tell you a little bit about our organization and tell you a little bit about the context that I have within this industry. So first of all, clearancejobs.com, we are an online networking platform specific for job seekers that have an active security clearance. So that's anything from a public trust all the way up to a TS SCI with some sort of poly. On the flip side, it's a venue for you to network with potential employers. And so kind of similar to a USA Jobs, but the main difference is that you actually have a living profile. So not only can you apply to cleared jobs on our site, you have a living profile that you can just let sit there and sort of be a passive job seeker. We have 3,000 entities, I'll call them, that use our resume database to find cleared talent. And that's both defense contractors, small guys all the way up to the big kahunas, and federal agencies use our site as well. And so the site was, it was built in response to 9/11. And so we've been in business for 23 years now. And I would say that we are the largest sort of online career networking platform within the cleared hiring space. So been online since 2002. We have, I think, 1.6 million registered candidates on our site, 3,000 defense contractors and federal agencies. And then I think we have between like 8,000 and 10,000 cleared recruiters that have seats on our site. Again, kind of looking for cleared talent, using our resume database, posting jobs, interfacing with potential candidates, and all that good stuff. And so really the biggest question I ask, well, are you a LinkedIn for people with security clearances? Yes, but not anyone can create a profile on our site. One, you have to have an active clearance as a job seeker. Two, you as a cleared recruiter or a hiring manager on our site, all of those folks are vetted. So you have to be vetted before you can create a profile on clearancejobs.com. So it's just a safer place to network within the national security space. And so my context, I'll speak to a little bit. I started with a defense contractor that did work for the National Ground Intelligence Center and the Defense Intelligence Agency out of Charlottesville, Virginia, among a number of other contracts and agencies, customers that we supported. And so I've hopped around to a few different contractors prior to joining Clearance Jobs, and I specialized in staffing and hiring and recruiting for DoD and intelligence community programs. So I actually used Clearance Jobs prior to joining their team. And so I've seen kind of the evolution of the product. And I would say that one of the main things from a job seeking perspective is that we try to make the networking and job seeking process as easy as we can. So I did want to touch on, just because I'm not sure of the population that I'm speaking to tonight, I know that, folks may have an active clearance, but a lot of the times I'm speaking to a group that formerly held a clearance and they're really interested in getting it back. And so I'm hoping that I can touch on a few tips and tricks to help that happen. I wanted to touch on the current clearance processing times. Over the last decade or so, we've seen a journey of the security clearance processing times. So we hit a backlog high of, I think, close to like 800,000. This was between 2015 and 2017, 18. And so that's when they implemented Trusted Workforce 2.0. And that's essentially doing continuous vetting where there's automated, the process is a lot more automated, whereas every 5 to 10 years previously, you would go through a periodic reinvestigation. We hit that backlog high and they realized, okay, we're not able to get really the cleared workforce in the door to work on these cleared programs because the clearances are getting all fudged up. So we saw a really good decline in clearance processing times where people were getting them a little bit quicker and interims were fairly quick. And that was great for staffing within the space. But for more recently, for the second quarter in a row, we're actually seeing processing times continuing to upswing. So for a top secret, and this is specific to the Department of Defense, so the intelligence community has their own kind of beast of numbers, but for the DoD, a top secret at this point is taking 170 days to be adjudicated. And then at the secret level, it's taking 100 days to be adjudicated. And so I mentioned this just to set expectations if you are looking to get sponsored and get that clearance back. Keeping in mind the processing times and making sure that potential employers know you understand that process can definitely be in favor. And I also say this because a lot of the times folks, maybe you held a top secret clearance previously. And so that is, you have those horse blinders on where you have to get the top secret when you get back into this space. I always recommend just go for the lower level, especially for if you're not going the government route and you decide to apply to a defense contractor. They're going to be much more inclined to sponsor you at the lower level because they just notoriously don't take as much time. And while the government is actually paying for the clearance, the way that a company is paying and the amount of time that a position stays vacant. And so the shorter time that it remains vacant it's just, you're easily able to convince them to sponsor you in the first place. So how to obtain a security clearance. I'll briefly touch on this. You can't pay for one yourself. You can't try to get one yourself. You have to have a contract or a position, i.e. for a government customer or a defense contractor that you're being sponsored for. So you actually have a contract or a mission that you are attached to initiate that background investigation process. And so what you'll do if you aren't currently cleared, you'll apply to a position that you are essentially qualified for minus the clearance. And then if the company thinks that you're a good fit, they would essentially sponsor you. You'd fill out the SF-86 or EAP or basically a long questionnaire about your background, about your job history, about any arrests that you've had, among a number of other things. And then you would go through the background investigation where your references would be interviewed, you would be interviewed, and then you would move into the adjudication phase and hopefully obtain a security clearance. And so the one thing I'll note here is sometimes, depending on the contractor or the agency that they are supporting, you can quickly obtain an interim security clearance. Essentially, you're going through a mini version of the background investigation process, and then once you're fully adjudicated, you obtain that security clearance. But an interim is a way to kind of get your foot in get you in the door to get started working on that contract. Let's see. A couple of tips to get a company to sponsor you. One that I have really been recommending recently is, I understand that this is sort of a cyber IT program. However, an easy way that you can convince a company to sponsor you is if you are supporting them in an overhead position while you get your security clearance put through that process. So one way that you can do that is by recruiting. So you obviously know the work that you've been kind of going through school for. If you sort of make the pitch to a company, hey, I will recruit because that's bringing in revenue, that's keeping their vacant billets down. I will recruit so you can put me through the security clearance process. And I've also seen that there have been a number of defense contractors listing on clearancejobs.com that they're willing to sponsor because recruiters sometimes need clearances as well. So that's one tactic. I would always say target the larger companies or the federal agencies that really have the bandwidth to sponsor a clearance applicant. Again, the government is a little more inclined to be able to put you through the process, whereas like a small business can't really leave a position vacant for that long. The other thing is taking note of your skill set. So cybersecurity candidates are really in high demand. So I would say take a look at how long a position has been open on a company's website. If it's been open for months, they may be in better shape to just sponsor a security clearance applicant. So again, staying in tune with resources like at clearancejobs.com, and I'll be sure everybody has the links. Staying in tune with the current processing times are, making it known that you understand the security clearance process and all the adjudicative guidelines. That just better positions you to the potential employer that you've done your research, you know that you're in a good position to obtain a security clearance, etc. And then, yeah, I think those are my tips there. I just had a thought though, and it completely left my brain. It will come back hopefully. So resume tips, I always say that these are going to differ from recruiter to recruiter, hiring manager to hiring manager. But really kind of the top 5 things that I would say are across the board. You just have to make sure that keywords from the job description are in your resume. Even if you think the recruiter or the hiring manager looking at your resume should be able to read between the lines, don't ever make those assumptions. Always just make sure those keywords and all of the work that's applicable to the job description is in your resume. Length is not as big of a factor for me. Those keywords are. So if your resume is 3 pages and somebody has arbitrarily told you that it needs to be down to 1, just keep the 3 pages. It's not that big of a deal. And certifications, I would say, if there's a certification that you are missing, but is in progress or you're going through a boot camp for, list that on your resume and just make sure that, you know, the potential employer that you're applying to knows that you're kind of working on it. And then one thing that a lot of people aren't familiar with from a contracting perspective is there were many customers that the contractor I was supporting had a good relationship with that contracting officer representative, essentially the government sort of PM. And so one thing that you can do is if you're kind of hitting the mark on all of the positions, but maybe lacking on one, you can always ask for a waiver. Let's say it's a certification. If you're just missing that, ask for a waiver, see if you can start in the program while you obtain that certification. If it's a matter of years of experience, you know, just kind of demonstrating that you have those other soft skills maybe to bring to the table, that can be a way to ask for a waiver as well. And then if you are missing experience in terms of requirements, again, that those years of experience, nonprofits are a good place to kind of, you may be volunteering, but you're at least gaining more experience. Internships, obviously, to get on the job training. And again, kind of homing in more on that becoming a recruiter, even though you're not directly gaining experience, maybe for the role that you're eventually trying to get, it at least gives you good experience within the business world from a contracting standpoint that you can add to your resume while you get that clearance. I think, you know, I think I might leave it there and open it up to Q&A. I'm not sure, let's see if there's been any specific questions.
Yeah, there's been a few, Katie, but I think the
Okay.
chat's been kind of all over the place. So if you're okay with it, I think that if the folks that are in here want to just come off mute and ask questions, if that's okay with you, that might be
I love
easier
it.
than trying to filter through the chat, because I know there were a few questions. All right, y'all, Q&A time. You got an expert on this right here. So if you got questions and you're trying to break into this, ask away to Katie. She's a great resource.
So I have a quick question, ma'am. I've got about 1.5 years out from retirement right now. Is it too early for me to sign up for clearance jobs and start getting on there? Should I wait a little while?
That's a great question. And that's one I get constantly when we're out in the wild. I would say create a profile. Absolutely. Like I said, when you clearance jobs being kind of like a two-way platform, you can just create that profile, let it sit there, and recruiters will likely, depending on what your clearance level is, what location you're looking in, recruiters will probably reach out. And at least at that point, you're kind of fielding what the job landscape is looking like over the next 1.5 years. And if something looks really interesting, or let's say you are really trying to get a job with Lockheed Martin and one of those recruiters reaches out to you, you would, I mean, even though you're a year and a half out, I would respond and say, hey, put me in your applicant tracking system, place me on your pipeline list, highly interested in your company. So it doesn't hurt to create a profile. You know, kind of along the same lines as every recruiter is going to give you different advice when it comes to building a resume. Every recruiter is going to tell you different when it comes to when you should start formally applying from your out day. And so my recommendation there is year and a half, create a profile on clearancejobs.com at maybe say 6 months, start formally applying places. But again, just be honest about your out day and what, you know, leave you have built up, and that what that official start date would look like. And then just take it case by case basis. Like I said, if you have a company or as well as you'd like, I would love to connect with you kind of offline, and we can see what we can do better.
Thanks for offering that, Katie. I'll also mention that like that feeds into the whole I remember on LinkedIn I put in sysadmin like undercase as one word. Because someone recommended I do that. And then all of a sudden I started getting daily job offer like requests. And when I had it the other way, I didn't. So it's like those tips and tricks.
Right.
It's like online dating profiles, right? You make one change,
Totally.
drastically change it. So I just mentioned that to anybody. I think that's part of this nuanced world of networking. And no matter, even with the best site, you know, little tips and tricks can sometimes help, but especially like Rebecca, gosh, great qualifications. I think it's cool Katie's offering to maybe take a little inside peek, and thanks for offering that, Katie. So
Yeah, for sure.
I just mentioned anybody else in that situation. Like I've definitely been there. So yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. No, it resonates. What else? I'm sorry, I'll shut up. I'll open the floor. What else we got for Katie?
Ms. Keller, what is the average timeline for an RRU running right now?
Like an upgrade for clearances?
Yes.
I wouldn't be able to speak to that just because that is so agency dependent. And it's so person dependent. Like if you're upgrading from a secret to a TS, the background investigation, if you've been through the background investigation for a secret, you know, it's kind of wildly different from a TS. So I wouldn't be able to speak to that, but if you do have agency specific questions, please connect with me after. I know that we report on a lot of the DoD components. So if it falls within that, I'd be happy to kind of look into it and see if we have average processing times.
Thank you.
I did see a question in the chat. So you have an active security clearance to join clearancejobs.com. That is correct. You have to have an active clearance, or it has to be technically current. You have to have held a job that requires the security clearance or the public trust within the last 2 years. However, that being said, you know, if you don't have an active security clearance, we have so many resources at your disposal that you can take a look at. One being, you can search all jobs on clearancejobs.com without having an active sort of profile. So you can always search like willing to sponsor. A lot of the times companies, even if they don't note that they're willing to sponsor, you'll be able to find one that is. You just have to apply. So at least you can like use the database in that way. The other thing, our news site at news.clearancejobs.com, Rebecca spoke to some of the articles that we put out there. That can be a really good resource. So if you want to subscribe to that. The last one I'll call out that you don't have to have an active security clearance for is clearancejobsblog.com. Essentially, that's kind of like the security clearance thread on Reddit. Basically, you can ask any question you can possibly imagine that touches the space. And we have background investigators and adjudicators and FSOs that kind of answer those questions on there. And then yes, dice.com, our sister company, you can certainly create a profile there. They are geared toward the tech space. And then remote work. So yeah, there are definitely remote and telework positions with a clearance, it likely would require, like you said, a little bit of travel because there aren't remote skiffs. But that being said, I think last time I checked, we had like 1,500 listed on our site. And I also do have a couple of referral companies I could point you in the right direction to if you do have a clearance and you're looking for something hybrid or remote. How long does your clearance remain active after you transition? So right now with continuous vetting, sorry, it used to be continuous evaluation, and I've been trying to get that out of my brain. Continuous vetting. With that, right now we're still kind of hearing that 2 years is the magic number. So I would say once you transition out, definitely keep in touch with your security shop while you're in the military, just to make sure all those ducks are in a row. But as soon as you get out, depending on like what your life goals are, if you're looking to get back into school, I would, when it gets closer to that 2-year mark, I would start applying to companies and getting in touch with FSOs that can check on you and on your security clearance personnel record. Just because I have heard kind of horror stories of that where people are told one thing and then they find out that their clearance is no longer able to be easily transitioned onto programs, and that's a huge bummer. So I would just say 2 years, keep in mind timelines, and keep in touch with security officers. Let's
Katie, I don't want to
see.
jump in for anybody, but I know you've touched on this in the past, but if you're willing to just touch on the sponsorship thing just one more time. So I know that's kind of outside the realm of clearance jobs, but it's a question we get a lot. In a program, just like, what does that look like when it's lapsed and you're looking for a company to sponsor you, but you used to have a clearance?
Yeah, I mean, so like I said, I feel like just making it known. So one thing I do tell people to do is, even if you've previously held a clearance, put that on your resume. I mean, don't lie about it and say that it's active, but saying that you previously held a clearance, it shows that you understand what the process is. Depending on when you held one, I would include that, because let's say like yours, you transitioned out of the military in February of 2022. And so like at this point you're like, oh shucks, it's inactive. I gotta try to get sponsored. And the last 2 years, the likelihood that you've gathered a considerable amount of debt, or like some of those high reasons that people are denied security clearance. If it's been that short of time, I mean, what could you really have done in the last couple of years? But yeah, just showcasing that you understand the process, you understand how things go, you've gone through it before, that can be a key indicator that you'd be a good candidate to get one again. Again, you got to target those larger companies. I mean, actually, that just spurred my thought from earlier. Well, okay, yeah, target those larger companies. I mean, like, even if you're just trying to upgrade a clearance, let's say you have a secret and you're trying to get a TS, like, target the larger companies. They are more inclined to bring you on board and sponsor you for that than a lot of the small and mid-sized contractors that I supported. And then I'm going to note that becoming a recruiter thing, in the meantime of you gaining that security clearance, if you're really trying to get one back, tell them you'll be a recruiter, and they'll likely bring you on board, because that's like the money making factor for defense contractors, is making sure that all of their programs are staffed. So I would say that, let me think. Were there any other specific questions for sponsorship about the process or something I'm not hitting?
I didn't have any, just a couple DMs, and it's a common question, so I thought I would ask.
Yeah.
Nothing super specific, but thank you, Katie, for touching on that.
Yeah, definitely. And if everybody who doesn't have a clearance, I mean, connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm constantly sharing folks that have hot jobs where they're willing to sponsor. So please connect with me. And again, I'll make sure everybody has all these links by the end of this. Let's see.
You can always share some with me, and I can always blast it out to everybody afterwards or whatever.
Yeah, definitely.
Thanks, Robert.
Okay, cool. I don't see any other questions in the chat. Do we have any Any other questions from the group?
Hop off mute, y'all. Now's your opportunity.
I had a question.
Yeah.
I'm at your website at the clearance jobs initial page there, and it has 3 check boxes. And I'm going to check off all 3. Is there supporting documentation I need to provide for verifying the U.S. citizenship, the active clearance on there? It, before clicking on the verify clearance button, I'm just curious. So that
No. So we don't ask for social security numbers, anything like that. We're not FSOs. We're not going to verify. The caveat there is, while we don't verify that people have an active clearance, we do have people that are blacklisted for, joining our site and then, finding out later from angry recruiters that they don't have an active clearance. So we don't verify. Long answer short, we don't verify, but yeah.
And a follow-up question, security clearances that are issued through federal jobs, civil service jobs, does that fulfill the equivalence of the clearances you described, top secret, that kind of stuff?
Yes.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Got a few minutes here left. What else we got?
Hi, Katie.
Hi.
My name is Ernest, and I'm taking also this program, and I live in Northern Virginia, DC area, and I am actually currently in healthcare, but taking this program with ambition of switching to tech. And when I'm doing my research, looking at the job around here, most of the jobs around here, they require security clearance. And I'm trying to get advice or any idea of just the initial, like starting from the bottom, how I can get the security clearance, if it's the joining the website you mentioned, or if any other way that can be helpful for starting. No military background, nothing at all. So I'm trying to get an idea or any advice on how I can start building up or getting the security clearance.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, knowing that you're in the DMV, depending on how far you're willing to travel, there's definitely a lot of good opportunities with companies that have their headquarters in that area, that work with many government customers in that area. I think when you see positions listed that say secret security clearance required, I'm not saying blast out your resume and just cast a wide net with positions you might not be qualified for, but if you hit everything and it's just the clearance that you're not hitting, I would still apply. I mean, I don't see the harm in that. If you might have just applied to a position that's been open for months and months and months, and they'll be like, okay, screw it. Like, let's sponsor the security clearance. The other thing I would note is Department of Army is a good organization to see if they have maybe something that's available. They've kind of been inclined in the last couple months to sponsor security clearances. The other thing is, while public trust technically isn't a clearance, and it technically does go against similar adjudicative criteria as higher level clearances, I've seen public trust be adjudicated pretty quickly. So that may be another route if you kind of aren't getting traction as you're applying to these secret required roles. Apply to those public trust positions. I know the USPTO, the US Patent and Trademark Office, they usually have a lot of positions open that require the public trust. That might be a good option.
Thank you.
Yeah.
If I may chime in on that statement that you were saying, Katie, this is Johnny. For Ernest, I will say, because I have been with the federal government, but this is my first federal job where I gained a clearance, and I will agree with Katie. It's a lot of these jobs will say, oh, you need this much experience or this, that, and the third, as well as the clearance type that they're looking for. I have noticed for me personally, being in the DMV as well, in order to even just get my foot into the industry, I applied to all and anything, but mainly the top secret or public trust, because those are more considered as a entry level to getting in, and most jobs will try to, as Katie said, if it's been posted for such a long time, they're like, okay, forget it, we'll just go ahead and hire you, and then they'll sponsor you in. That's one of the major ways that I've seen to get your foot in, to get a clearance in order to start working up the ladder. That's been the biggest help for me, is just applying to more entry level based positions that require, such as a secret, public trust, possibly a top secret. I know GDIT. Sometimes they'll sponsor. They're not as lenient, but they will sponsor. The Department of State, which I work for, they sponsor, depending on the contractor. uh DOD does the exact same thing. It's just depending on the level of what it is that they're looking for. I would just say shoot for more entry levels. More than likely they'll sponsor you, especially within the DMV, because they're looking for almost any and everybody to fill these positions. So that'll be your easier easier entry into getting into a clearance.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much, Johnny, for validating what I'm saying. But it is true. I mean, like, the government has a recruiting and retention problem right now. I mean, we've seen it within the military service. Recruiting numbers are down. We've seen that younger generations aren't as inclined to support, these kind of agencies, and so they're hurting for talent. So it doesn't hurt to apply. It really doesn't.
I would just say that, just to echo that goes for more than security clearances, y'all. I beat a dead horse with that, but now don't lie on your resume. But goodness, people like people who learn. I taught myself enough SQL on a weekend by w3schools.com, because it was the one programming language I wasn't super comfortable with in my interview. I said that on the resume. I said I'm studying, right? So I am. So remember that. People always appreciate that. I appreciate that when I hire people. I see currently studying, currently working on. It's a heck of a lot better than saying all the experience. So we've got we're a little over time. And I want to be respectful of Katie. Is there any other questions? Feel free to hop off mute. Going once. Going twice. Well, I just want to say thank you all so much for making the time on a Tuesday. Katie, thank you so much. You're an excellent, you're not only a personality on LinkedIn, but you have excellent information regarding getting a clear job and what it's like to get into that space. And you're excellent. You have a great organization. It's helped a lot of our folks, but I also appreciate your commitment to our student veteran and law enforcement population, trying to get a better gig. This recording will be available on YouTube in the next week or two. Any links that Katie shares with me, I'll make sure to send out in our next newsletter. We have another fireside chat coming up in March with Microsoft, and that's going to be a bit of an AMA similar to this. Our next career fair will be looking to May, and we'll be sending information out. So it's not for a little while, but we'll have monthly events going on with CWCT. As always, Amber Schuler and myself work for the program, as well as Josie. I wanted to introduce Josie tonight. Josie Gallardi is our newest hire. She's a full-time working on employer engagement and developing new relationships with organizations that want to hire cyber talent. So we're really happy to have Josie here. If you're there, feel free to come off cam and say hey. But between Josie, Amber, and myself, we are available. We want to help you out. But when Katie says it, Katie's a very busy woman, but if she is offering, if she will actually help you one-on-one. So make sure that you take advantage of that, because she has a great commitment to our student veterans. Again, thank you all so much, and I hope you have a great night. Anybody wants to stick around, I'll keep this open for another 10 minutes or so if you have any specific questions for myself. Thank you, Katie, and thank you, CWCT community.
Thank you so much. Everybody have a good night.
Peace. My voice will be back one day.
All right, Steve, I think I'm going to shove off because it doesn't look like anybody's got any questions.
No, I'll stick around and then I'll close it in a few minutes.